If you want to live, well, you better be arrested. I'm going to take you out, or I'm going to kill you. That's right. I got a death warrant in my pocket. Life or dead, I'm to take you to the Marshal's office. That settled it. I know his wife was very good. I grew up with him in school myself. Yeah, I know. But I knew he killed her if he did. For some reason, I never know what. But he went to prison and stayed a long time. He got parole and came back.
If you were to tell people who know nothing about Oklahoma history, and certainly not a whole lot about black history other than what they read now about black history from the South and in the Northeast, how does it differ? How growing up in this part?
You see, I don't know why people do that. I don't know who started it. I get sick of the word black. Our best paper, if he reports in the morning, 5 men got killed here on the highway. Said 3 men and 1 black. What make you do that? When there was 5 men? What made you do that when it was all men? Right? You'll make that discrimination, and every time you say something about it, the black did so and so. Now why? See, we didn't have that in territorial days. No. Everybody here was an Indian. Don't care how black he was. Yeah. You spoke of the territory, it just spoke of the people that was there. Yeah. But that's what our civilization have brought on, you see, and those things are yet in the mind of the young folks. It'll be that way until the Lord comes again.
When I was talking to okay. What time do you have your church services on Sunday morning?
11 o'clock.
11 o'clock.
Preaching. Sunday school, 9 o'clock.
Yeah. Do you preach Sunday school too?
These were done like that. All right. Yeah, I built all those houses. Just a number of them. I think I built about 6 church houses in the country. Different places. Boynton, yeah, I built a church there. And built a church in part of it in Moscow, yeah. Yeah. I was in with the deal, built the Ragsdale Funeral Home.
Out in Wewoka.
Yeah, me and old man Purdue, them, we built all those things. I worked about 30 years just steady at Cobbler's Plain.
When are you going to retire?
Hmm?
When are you going to retire?
Oh, I can't retire. I have preachers tell me that all the time. Why don't you retire? I said, I'll do that when I die. See, if I go to retire now, I'll die quicker than the Lord intended me to do. But it's really, young man, that is what keeps me alive. I never lay down or make a day without something in my mind to do. And something that needs to be done. And that's what keeps me living. Everybody here in town knows me. Everybody in the world. Yeah, they know me. They're as nice to me as could be. That's right. Anything they want to know that they don't know, they'll come and call me. That's right. Yes, I think about a week ago, a woman called me and asked me, well, what was Haskell looking like? I think she said 50 years ago. I said, there wasn't no Haskell. You know. I said, I know when Haskell was laid out for a town. I know the man that built Haskell. He became the first governor of the state of Oklahoma. He's a railroad man. He wasn't a politician.
So you built all those houses and all those churches and all those funeral homes.
That's right.
What's the difference between your work now, when you were still carpentering, and what you had to do a few years ago?
Well, my work now is, I guess I'm still in the building business, but not houses. I'm building men and women like that. And they resort to me today for whole lots of information that they couldn't get otherwise. And I live accessible to that all the time. That's right. There's a white woman here now on the stove here. She had me to come up there and locate the first place her daddy had a stove. She didn't know where it was. I said, yeah, I know where it is. Yeah. Some white woman came here about a year ago and said, I have the history. I live in Kentucky. Said, I have the history of being born in Choska Bottom. And I've been trying to find Choska Bottom for a couple of years. I said, well, what did they tell you about it? Did they tell you where it was? Said, no. Said, but I looked for it and I can't find a bottom up and down the Arkansas River. Said, it was in the river bottom. I said, yeah. Said, do you know where it was? I said, I know where it is. And she was here in the car, that's the truth. She said, well, how can they find us? I said, as soon as I get my coat and hat, we'll go to Choska Bottom. We went across the bridge here, and she stopped the car and said, I'm still disappointed. She said, I don't see no bottom. I said, this used to be Choska Bottom. It's the finest farming section there is in the United States now. I said, the trees are all gone. Civilization and mechanism and improvement in farming moved all the trees away. And here you got the finest crop of tomatoes and beets and lettuce and fruit that you ever have. She said, couldn't you? I said, yeah, this is Choska Bottom. I said, you see what the thing has done? Choska Bottom. I said, this is it right here. She said, well, now, what proof do you have? I said, the man that had the first store here in Choska Bottom, he's buried right there. See that little monument set up there in that field? That's where he's buried, right there. They had a big store here. And your folks must have been in that group that lived here in the bottom at that time. It was a bottom. You couldn't walk through it. There wasn't no wagon road. You couldn't do nothing with it. It was covered in water the whole year round. The river would overflow. And there wasn't nothing out there but black snakes, mosquitoes, and frogs and things. Nobody could use that land. I said, but civilization, you see that ditch over there they call the Yellow Dog? That drained the whole bottom.
Okay.
And it became a farming section.
It was Anton Furr, because that was in our program.
Yeah.
And we found a picture of Judge Reed. We found a picture of Bass Reeves.
Yeah.
And we had a number of pictures that people had given us of different pioneers that had come in. And
Yeah.
a lady by the name of Bertie Farmer. Who,
Yeah.
You know Mrs. Farmer?
Yeah.
Is she still living, or do you know?
Yes, she's still living.
In Oklahoma City, right? Yeah. She told me she was a court reporter, and they had a convention for Haskell. He was running for governor at the time. And they said, no black folks allowed in this convention hall. But in the town that he was having his speech, they wanted to get a record of his speech. And she was the only court reporter around, you know. So they had her come in, and she sat there and she listened, you know, and took all the notes down. And she's like you. She remembered details and pictures and places and all that as if it were yesterday.
We have some very eminent lawyers among Negroes and Indians in those days. They were brave. They...
Ask your question.
Want to reverse the questions? Okay.
They were brave.
Now I'm going to ask a few questions. You don't have to answer them necessarily because you already have. This is just our way of being able to get them recorded on the television. What do your grandchildren think about all this?
Well, some of them don't even stay long enough to learn it. They think it's a fairy story, and they can't imagine me knowing things like that with all the attraction that's going on now.
Okay, let me ask you another question here.
Yeah.
What was life like for a slave among the Indians in Oklahoma?
Well, the Negro slave here with the Indian was in quality, equally with the Indian himself.
Okay. One more question.
Yeah.
Why was the black man's history in Oklahoma so different than black history in other parts of the country?
Because of his opportunity. He didn't have nobody here to tell him, don't do this or that. No. Or you can't do this or that. He found an open space where he was absolutely free. He set up his own churches. He requested his own schools. That's right. He built his own farm, his little farm patch, wherever he wanted to. You learn to live without any hesitation of anybody. That's right. The chiefs.
Okay. Here in Oklahoma?
That's right. You want another question?
I got another question here.
Okay.
So was Oklahoma an open door?
It was, to the extent that the Indian assumed the names of the folks who owned them. McIntosh,
Okay.
Perryman, whatever their parents. One was a McIntosh and another a Johnson. Just depends on who owned them.
Okay. You ready?
That's right.
Why come to Oklahoma?
They came because of
Let me
the
ask you one more time.
difficulty of owning and possessing their lands in Alabama and the southern states.
All right. Why come to Oklahoma?
It was a reservation for the Indian tribes.
Got this down. What is your recipe for living so long?
Well, being active with people and for people.
Okay, one more time. What is your recipe for living so long?
Well, just keep living, just don't die.